This is part two and how water power is used in your favorite anime or fantasy series is probably terrible and doesn't make sense, especially when it comes to characters fighting each other. We talked a lot about Avatar The Last Airbender, and I listed the top 2 ways that I think that powers should be used in kind of fantasy settings, and this is number 3. The third way I think is the best way to use fantasy water and ice powers is actually just movement and transportation. Like if I was creating sort of like a martial art that used water powers, it would be around mobility and ending a fight quickly, and dealing like a critical blow within the first couple minutes of a fight. In the last video, we talked about a character having a water whip where they had like a sword or a blade at the end of a whip made out of water that was connected to them, connected to their hand, where the actual point that's hitting is actually something metal or something like more powerful than like your water. And I actually made some AI art to kind of show this. It's not exactly what I wanted it to look like. It's actually pretty close to this one, especially where you see that the whip-like part is blue. It's supposed to be water. It kind of made it a watery electricity thing. Doesn't matter. But something like this is kind of how I was thinking about it. I made some other ones, right, where the whip is made out of water and you have like long-range options here. And this one, the sword is made out of water, which is not what I meant. The AI art does what it wants, but you kind of get the idea. Now, the third way I thought of using water powers is the thing that water is good at is actually transportation, whether you think of boats or skiing. And one thing I thought is if I had any kind of water powers, the first thing I would do, especially in a show like Avatar, is I would turn the whole ground into ice, and I would be skating just around whoever I'm fighting or whoever I'm dealing with and moving way faster than them. And whether it's you make like a little water highway for yourself to move on, or the ground is made of ice, however your fantasy series works. This is something I've only seen, I think, twice. Not a thing, but I think once. I think I saw it in the show Shaman King has a character who uses like a snowboard and he makes his own ice that he snowboards on. And then X-Men, I think Bobby, the Iceman character, like makes little ice highways that he like travels on. But those are the only 2 places I've really seen that. And I think that every fantasy series should do this or do a version of that and kind of use the actual element to his advantage. I get really bored of how fantasy series, specifically anime, uses water powers where they just kind of like chuck it at their opponent. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make sense like in context of the world or realistically. Because if you had something better, you're throwing a rock through it or you're throwing fire through it or whatever, those options would just be better than doing that. And if you have a fantasy series and you have a whole country or city or group of people that all have water powers, they should be unstoppable on the ocean, and this should be a major part of the series. Like, there should be a pirate crew that's just a problem because they all have water powers, and then you can't even get close to them with a boat because they'll just sink it, and you can't even get close to them on the ocean because they stay on boats, and they'll just sink you, even if you're on the boat or your character can float or stand on water or fly. That should be like game plan number 1, and to the point where like countries were kind of like real life or like kind of like the 1800s where a country's military might was like 80% on the ocean. That should be a part of a series too. Avatar is a good example. The Water Nation should, I know I keep going back to Avatar, but it's really the gold standard for like fantasy and elemental series. But the Water Nation should run the entire planet because of the nature of being waterbenders, they should be the best traders and have the best transportation, where they're contracted out to trade goods from one city to the other because they can just literally do it faster and better than everybody else, which is like a major part of a country's economy. Now this is turning into a video not necessarily about fighting, but this is now I'm off on a tangent, but this is a thing that you should see in series that they don't, series don't think about or take the time to think about it. Yeah, it's way too complicated. Nobody would care about this kind of stuff. But if you made your world smaller and your characters weren't saving the entire world, but they were saving a country or whatever, you could deal with, oh yeah, there's 20 pirates, but they all have water powers, and you can't even get close to them because they'll just sink any boat, and have characters work around those problems. Which is similar to making like the water bubble type situation. And now, because you have these different abilities that attack, a character indirectly, whether it's the whip or using fogs to hide yourselves with water powers, or being able to just drown people or overwhelm them with water. You have, or freeze them too. You have interesting ways for your characters to kind of like get out of situations, and it's not just what's it called, a Dragon Ball Z Kamehameha wave beam struggle against. Now there's actually a little bit of strategy in your series, or like a lateral problem where your character being stronger than the other character doesn't matter because they have this big advantage and they're attacking you in a very different way. Okay, so the next way I thought of to use water powers in fantasy series to win a fight, this is the fourth way I thought of, and this is kind of freezing, but kind of not freezing. I thought of two ways that you could kind of like address this in your series. And again, it depends on what kind of fantasy series it is, but the first way I thought of is just as death style, stone cold freezing the opponent and just putting them on ice. And this would work if not every character had elemental powers, where this character was just like Rock Lee and really strong and fast, and this character could freeze, and then now this character that doesn't have a way to combat that, they don't have electric or fire powers or something like that, can't really deal with being frozen and being cold. If they can't have like magic that like defends them from that kind of thing. And then you have a really cool like rock, paper, scissors style fight where normally this character freeze thing might not be that strong, but now that they're fighting somebody that can't really deal with that, then they can beat them kind of automatically by default. And it should be sort of a rock, paper, scissors situation where the person that can freeze thing, now they're fighting someone that has lightning powers or fire powers or whatever. Now that doesn't work that good. Or if they're dealing with somebody with earth powers, like they're like Gar, where they can make a bunch of sand that can absorb that coldness into the ground and not actually into themselves, so they themselves don't get frozen. And then if the ground is cold or frozen, it like doesn't matter. The second way I've thought of using it is almost like Spider-Man. Now imagine a quick freeze type situation where you're not using it to freeze someone solid, but kind of surrounding them in ice, where like you use your water to maybe swing from something, and then you throw that water, and while you're fighting them, you freeze your opponent's legs for just a second. And you use it to kind of interrupt the battle, interrupt the fight, and it's something, an extra thing your opponent has to worry about. This is one of my ideas I hadn't thought about the most, because it's really hard to make that idea work in a reasonable kind of way, because every other option is better. If someone else can make lava, that's better than freezing things. If somebody else can make something explode, that's better than freezing things. So it would be cooler, actually, if that was a situational deal where your characters know that the other people don't have a way to deal with freezing. Or maybe your characters don't have a way to deal with freezing and have to come up with a clever solution. So that's it. These are the ways that a fantasy series can use water powers better than they have been.